Today's April 25th. We are here for the policy committee meeting. Are there any announcements or communications? I think there's minutes that have been circulated earlier today. I know that some edits have been made already. If there's any other edits, please make them because we'll be putting them forward on our next legislative meeting. So today on the agenda we have a few of the policies that we have up first, second reading and adoption at our next legislative meeting. The first one of those is policy 253, transgender, gender nonconforming students. There was one, I think, suggestion made by Mr. Sirota at our lab. He had sent an email within the policy saying to drop 4 words in the purpose. The second line, with that in mind, just dropping those and just start that sentence with the district. I don't have a problem with that. I think we can do that, and that's not a substantive change within the policy.
So it would say what the district strives to provide?
Yeah, if we do, yeah, instead of the district adopts this policy, yeah, the district strive, well, no, let's see.
Could you repeat what his suggestion was?
Right, okay, so in the purpose it says, it's a second sentence. With that in mind, he said to drop those first 4 words right there. Yeah, I'm sorry, he's right with the first sentence. The second sentence, he just says,
Superfluous language.
exactly.
Okay.
So, I don't see that as a,
No, but why wouldn't you say therefore? I mean, there's no transition.
right, so,
Therefore.
I think so.
I had another, more of a, I haven't seen any literature for this, but I just have a feeling that at some point in time, transgender and gender nonconforming is going to become obsolete just because of the word nonconforming may carry with it some sort of negative connotation. So I'm suggesting that perhaps we consider changing the name of the policy to gender expansive and transgender policy.
Gender, what was the second word?
Gender expansive.
Expansive.
Expansive and transgender policy. I made this recommendation. It doesn't change, it doesn't require any new readings. It just, again, I haven't seen anybody say this yet. I just have a feeling that the word nonconforming is eventually going to be deemed to be negative.
Okay. So about within the policy too?
It would not be within the policy. It
Okay.
would be within
Just within the title? Because I know we use the word gender nonconforming a few times within the policy itself.
oh, I see what you're saying. No,
Right.
then I would just change transgender and gender nonconforming. The same thing.
So every time we see the words transgender, gender, and gender nonconforming, that is a
Yeah.
set of words we're changing it to gender expansive and transgender.
Yeah, and you know, I mean, it's just a suggestion. If
Mhm.
you'd rather not create an issue with the second reading, I understand.
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, I don't know if it changes anything other than using. What do you think, Rob?
I think it just relates to the whole idea of sorry.
Check. I would think it just relates to the whole idea, like when we've been trying to name like particular social media sites, is try to capture as much as you can in advance so that you don't have to change it consistently. And so I would agree with the change in the sense that it's probably a little bit wider than where it is right now.
Right, well, then you can make the change. You don't have a second reading unless somebody on the board feels like it is a change, in which case then you can defer it for a second reading.
Okay.
And I would do the same thing in the, if you want to talk about the regulation or just pull it off.
I'll do that in a minute. We'll just go through and make sure
Sure.
see if there's any other changes. Okay. So if there's no other amendments to the policies, or as we can talk about when we talk about the regulation in just a minute. We can look at policy 800. I think that, again, Mr. Schroeder had a couple of comments to the actual wording of policy 800. And I think one of his comments, this was in an email he had sent to, I think, a couple members of this committee. He wrote in policy 800, this is, in his opinion, a very important policy, but it has terrible wording in his opinion. He doesn't like the phrase that the various departments have set forth, ... He didn't feel that was an appropriate for the policy, that the policy dictates what happens rather than reacting to what has happened. This policy should direct the administration to develop guidelines. This policy, as written, does not clarify how records will be retained and destroyed. So his recommendation is that the sentence, it should read, the superintendent shall develop administrative regulations as required to ensure compliance with applicable federal and state laws and regulations, to assist employees in determining what information / documents / data shall be retained, how long they shall be retained, and how they shall be disposed of or destroyed. So that was his suggestion on policy 800.
Could you just get rid of the second paragraph?
I think so. So strike the second paragraph.
I think that works. I don't know if we need anything that is within that second paragraph to add on to the third paragraph. I think is what Mark's suggestion was essentially. But I don't think it's necessary. So with that, if we're taking out the second paragraph, Ken, do you think we need to do another first reading, or do you think that?
I think it's the same. I don't think the second paragraph, upon further review, I don't think the second paragraph actually even says anything. So
Right.
if you're taking out surplus language, so again, if somebody feels differently,
I think maybe perhaps the only other, that second paragraph adds some of the language of retaining and destroying, whereas the third paragraph, I don't see the retaining and destroying. The retaining is in the firth paragraph, but not necessarily setting the guidelines for it.
But in order to comply with the federal and state laws and regulations, you need to have something that says you need to have regulations on destruction of records. So it's implicit in complying with federal state regulations, federal state laws and regulations that you talk about destruction as well as retention.
That's maybe just,
We do follow the established schedules that we receive from the state.
Well, the schedules will be in.
Right, they'll be in the red.
Yeah.
I think my comment is just more or less in the second paragraph is the only mention of destruction, and even though it's implied, I think it would be worthwhile to add, make sure that's part of the policy so that it's cueing into where the regulations will give guidelines for that.
Right, well then why don't we just say, the very last sentence, which says efficiency of district operations, and to clarify how records will be retained and destroyed.
Yep,
Exactly.
that's great. It just,
Perfect. That looks good for policy 800. The next policy is up, is 108, adoption of curriculum materials. Look at the new name of this. This policy we waited on last time. We've had 2 first readings of it at this point to hope catch up with the administrative regulation. Again, Mark had a suggestion on this policy, just that to remove some of the language and just place it all within the administrative regulation. I mean, I think we're placing a lot of it in. We do have administrative regulations doing more detailed work. His suggestions, just to be specific, was that he thought the authority and definition in sentences 2 and 3, the delegation responsibility, that should be the policy itself. And the rest of it could be in the administrative regulation. Also, he states that the first mention of selection committee says they involve appropriate representative staff and members and comes before the more detailed explanation in the section immediately following. Does the sentence need to be in here at all? I think if this would be more clear if the first part is moved to the next section in the regulation, and then delete the sentence.
It's really a pleasure of the board here. This was put in policy back in 2002 for whatever reason, whether the board at that point felt like it wanted to be more prescriptive as far as it's
Right.
up to the discretion. It's really, the board can either put it in there to make sure it happens, or say, put everything right. It's really up to the board.
Okay.
I tend to agree with Mark, less is more.
Move guidelines, timelines, and community review to AR, and what was the point? Are you said 180 out?
Definition, authority definitions. What you didn't mean.
Okay, what guidelines, timelines, community review, remove, and then which part of that, which should be dropped?
He said keep authority definitions in sentences 2 and 3 of delegation responsibility. That we didn't need, the director of curriculum has delegated the responsibility.
That's good, I can figure that.
So strike that sentence.
Well, we'll move it, yeah.
Okay.
So everybody else gets it, right?
Yep. All right, so I guess with that, we can do another first reading. Yeah, a third first reading.
Parental first reading.
Yes. Stays on the policy agenda forever. Okay. And then the last policy that we have scheduled for second reading / adoption is 214. I'm not sure if there's any, I haven't heard anything, reason to make any change at this point to 214 policy.
Nor have I administratively.
Okay. So that'll go forward for second reading and adoption, 214. So we're up to the administrative regulation for policy 253, the
Get policy.
gender expansive,
You can now call it the get policy.
the GET policy.
It's easier to say.
Ah, so that's why you really changed the name.
That's what you changed.
Here we go. All right. The GET regulation. All right. So I know last meeting I had made some suggestions, and it looks like they have been put in the regulation. So.
Yeah, and I'll be blunt with you, that consistently asserted gender identity, that's my best shot at it. There is no definition of that. The few references you see to it are basically saying, are just basically general. They just say asserted across multiple settings for some period of time. That's not very helpful. So I don't know, it's whatever period of time you decide you want it to be.
Well, and I think it's one of those things where it's a case-by-case basis, because if you're saying it's been for 5 years, but we're talking about a second grader, you know, I mean, it's gonna depend really on the situation, I think, and that's where it's hard to like nail down, well, it's been a kid who's been saying this for the last, because, I mean, so much of that's gonna really just depend on each child, I think.
But the multiple
Right.
settings part at least addresses the concern about somebody deciding one day, just second day this, or basically switch.
Right.
So,
Because we want to make it clear that it's the people that are actually going through this versus some student who has less than good intentions, so.
Who makes that determination?
I think it's gonna be a case-by-case basis. It's gonna be a situation where, when these cases come up, it's gonna be where parents or kids are talking to the administration or teachers, and it's gonna be something working together with families. I mean, I think it's for some kids, you know, hopefully it's a family thing. I'm sure for some kids, they might not have the family support, so it's gonna be working with, you know, a kid through that. So, but I mean, that's why we don't have necessarily like a test. Like they have to fill out these forms and get this, you know, we don't necessarily want to do it that way because that's such a burden.
The presumption's always going to be to take the student at their word, because, I mean, truthfully, this is designed to address a situation which I'm not sure there's any documented case that it ever happened, which is that, well, I'm going to do this just because, you know, today I feel like going to the, you know, somebody's locker room.
No, it's just
Never documented case that ever happening, so this is designed to address the concern that we don't ever expect it to happen.
yeah. But at this end, while not putting some type of extra burden or test on kids that are gender expansive or transgender.
Anecdotally, I can share that in conversations with superintendents in surrounding districts where they have addressed these issues, the key that they stress is in each situation you work closely with the student and their family, because every situation is different, but the key is having that working relationship with the family.
So as I'm reading the regulation under guidelines on page E2, it seems as though that paragraph isn't necessarily asserting a working relationship with the parents. And so if I'm reading it correctly, it's in general, the prerogative is to assert the rights of the transgender and gender non-conforming students belong to the student, do not require additional parent-guardian consent, unless the assertion of a right delineated in these guidelines implicated FERPA. And so I don't know if that's necessarily, what I've noticed is I've read probably about 2 dozen policies of this nationwide, and I've noticed that some of the guidelines will have that particular paragraph and others will not. I'm just wondering whether or not it needs to be reworded so that there is some aspect of parental.
Well, we have to work with the, for example, student pregnancy. There's certain other areas where our counselors have guidelines where they may not be able to inform the parents. So we've equated this to that, unless you see.
I'll give a real life example here, but I had a situation where there was a transgender student who wanted to talk about his experiences to the school newspaper. And the parents said, I don't want that.
student's right to do it, it's not yours. Now, if the student says, I want to change my name on my student records and the parents object, that's the parents' statutorily granted right to decide that. So that's really what that's designed. This is designed to basically break ties in a reasonably, a significant percentage of cases, the parent doesn't agree with the student's choice. So there has to be a mechanism to break the tie. If you're getting conflicting, the parents are saying one thing and the student's saying something else. That's what that's for. I think you make a good point though, Robert, and that there should be a preface here that says, generally speaking, the most effective plans are the ones where everybody agrees and we work together and blah, 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 blah. However, in those cases where there's not agreement, so maybe I think that would be good to do a preface there. Yeah, I'll put something together that says pretty, in better words, what I just.
Yeah.
The article today that was in our daily PSBA spoke about,
Required.
Yeah,
yeah, the Inquirer, yeah, spoke also about the high school having policies regarding the diploma. If the child wants the name altered on the diploma, I just want to make sure that we're aware of that and we're getting some.
That's what B is for.
Okay.
Excuse me, are we removing the gender nonconforming definition on page E2?
we're gonna use
Yeah.
I'm gonna change all that to
extended expanse.
GEC, right?
Yeah, but I mean, it's diploma.
Concerned about, sure it's covered or?
Well, no,
I'm not sure. It
Right.
sounded like what they did in Springfield was they issued 2 diplomas.
Right, they did one for, the parents wanted one as the biological sex, and the student wanted as what their gender identity was. So they ended up giving out 2 diplomas.
Smart move on their part, I would say.
Yeah.
Good practical solution to the problem.
Right. I mean, so it looks like from our policy, and I guess that's what is that from our policy, it looks like that we're not required to do that unless there's been a court order change, something like that, which usually takes you past the age of 18 anyway, which outside of our schools generally. So that was the only thing, is that what would our policy prevent us from doing such a thing?
Diplomas don't,
I mean, is it official school record?
no, but it's something that you give to somebody, you don't use it for anything. But
It's, what counts is the transcript being stamped by the district. The diploma is really just a nice piece of paper that sort of memorializes an event. It's not, if anyone wants a student's record, they're going to look for that stamped, sealed transcript, not the diploma.
Same thing with the yearbook. If the child wants the new name to appear in the yearbook and the parents want the birthright name, but
until we get more clear guidance on that, my advice has been go with the student. Yearbook's not a student record. Yearbook's not
Right.
nothing official.
yeah.
I mean, what would you do if there was a kid had a nickname?
Right.
If you
Right.
instead of calling Ken Bruce, I want to be called Kenny or whatever in the yearbook. The parent says, I hate that name, don't use it.
Right.
The yearbook staff would say to the parents, forget it. We're going to use the name that they want to
Did
use.
you use Ken or Kenny in your? No, I just want to make sure that our principal is aware of some of these potential issues, and then also our yearbook editor knows
They have
these
just
things.
training in here. You
Right.
can't substitute. I mean, there's going to have to be education and training. It's going to have to be ongoing.
And when these situations come up, there have to be conversations, because it's going to be so specific, everyone. So we do the training with the big caveat, call, talk to the administration. And,
So,
yeah.
New Jersey passed a law, correct, where PA did not? Is that what I read this morning?
Yeah.
I don't know in New Jersey, but PA does, the PA has no law, correct?
PA has no law. Okay.
Although, I'm not even aware of any proposed laws. in the PA.
And training has actually begun. One of our administrative council meetings several months ago was dedicated to training around this topic, and several of our administrators have gone out to various trainings that have been provided. So I feel that we are comfortable in knowing when to ask questions if we should have to do that.
So I'm going to conform the definitions to the policy and then add a preface before the guidelines. Was there anything else?
I don't have anything else. Does anyone have any other ones at this point? We need a minute to look.
We're just saying this room set up makes me feel like I'm testifying for Congress.
We're Congress.
Feel no pressure.
Okay.
Vixen, bring the May 9th for approval.
Yes, if everyone's good with that at a time, yes. So next, we'll take that May 9th for approval for the regulation. Okay. Next on the agenda is Regulation 800, go hand in hand with Policy 800.
And the revisions that were requested, and I collaborated with Bill on all the email and electronic stuff. Please look at it. It's your final vote. Yeah. It's all good.
For Brent, you should use this mic. Mark, this is the one that you've been looking for. This one is amazing. It could be the spot I'm in the room. Like, it's really, really ridiculously powerful. I just wanted to make sure that with records management, so all of these requirements are easy to do for our email system. I'm wondering with respect to Brenda, your office, Tom, your office, are those, if I look at like F4, with our current records management that we have in place and the systems you have in place, are we able to do these things? Index and search records?
You mean as far as manually, on physical documents?
I would know for electronic, for our digital storage, for electronic records.
Electronics much easier, obviously, than the physical documents that we currently are keeping. You know, I'm not proposing we scan everything that we have and have it become electronic. So it's not an easy process, but we are, and we're also destroying, and that's key. So every summer we purge.
Okay, so send adoption. Adoption of this doesn't suddenly put a burden on you. That's
Actually, when I arrived in Upper Dublin, I spoke to Mr. Roos, and since that was state requirement, we've been more or less doing this, and maintaining the documents along that timeline. All right, thanks for the question.
this is one of those things where you're almost better off having a bad policy than no policy, because at least with a bad policy, you'll see what you can't do, and then you'll want to change it. So this thing can be changed, whenever there's an issue.
And I think one of the concerns, or one of the things is that we want to make sure that all the departments have an opportunity to look at this before we adopt it. So just making sure it gets out there across administration. So if anybody sees anything, they can let us know, and we can consider that and modify the policy or the regulation prior to adoption or approval, and then soon thereafter, since it's all within the regulation and not an actual policy. It's a long one.
Sorry.
Oh, it's fine. It's long. I don't know what I should say. Okay. So we'll put Regulation 800 through for approval on May 9th. So next is going to be the Regulation 108. Curriculum materials corresponding with the new policy, the updated policy as well.
I'll integrate the transported policy language into that first page. And the rest of it's all the compliance with COPA, Child Online Privacy Protection.
This red's new, right?
Correct.
Can I ask a question in regards to just point of clarification on G1 where it says April 1st annually is the date? If this gets adopted after April 1st for this year, we're looking at next year for its first review. So April 1st, 2017.
I'm not sure. I'm assuming that whether this is in effect or not, there's some timetable for the Director of Curriculum to do this. I don't know if that April 1st deadline's already been met for this year or not.
It wouldn't become effective until then, but doesn't mean that person wasn't expected to have already done this by April 1st. This year would be when we get it.
This year will be when we get it done. I don't know that we had a date that we adhered to in the past, but we're looking at this as part of our budget development process annually. So having that date will be helpful for Ms. Bray and myself in finalizing budget requests.
There had been conversation in the last meeting on this first page. Joan had brought up the need for some kind of language about the ongoing holistic innovation and integration and substitution that happens with curricular resources, right? So we have in the normal workflow of delivering that curriculum, teacher, world event happens, social studies, something happens, and the teacher says, we all did this, and I've done this year after year, but now I'm going to still get at the same content and skills, but I'm going to approach it in a different way, right? And so that happens all across curricular areas, all grade levels. And then typically what happens in that curricular review process is colleagues come together and they say, you know, I did this project on in geometry, looking at these types of angles, et cetera, and measurements, instead of what we traditionally do. And they compare notes, and how was the outcome, and how was it. So do we need to build in any kind of language to sort of honor or protect that creative process?
No, because this is just adoption of materials. This isn't really,
It's how should we get there, probably.
I think we're all set, having reviewed this with Mrs. Morrison.
Okay.
A quick question, if I may, in procedure in the first paragraph, Ken. Procedure, the district director of curriculum shall review all lists of curriculum materials and other instructional materials submitted by the schools. Schools can't submit. I mean, what do we mean to say instead of by the schools? It's not schools. I mean, schools are not submitting it.
Who doesn't? I don't actually know.
I don't know.
That would be, Ava works with the content coordinators, and generally that would come up from the work they're doing, the teachers are doing with the content coordinator, and then it would go to either the director of elementary education or curriculum director.
Who would be,
It's a very organic.
who picks the content coordinators? Principals? The principals pick them, or?
Well, no, it's a district level decision.
It's an actual.
It's an actual position, yes.
Okay.
Uppercase C, content coordinator. It's a very organic process. I mean,
I
you know.
just want to make sure I was writing in.
Yeah.
And each school has one?
We have them assigned in some content areas K-6, 7, 12, and in other areas one person, for example, in science, one person covers the entire K-12 scope.
So the district content coordinators.
Correct.
They're administrators, Mr. President, in the Act 93 agreement. So they're specifically delineated as administrators in the district.
So we'll just say the district content coordinators.
Yes, that should suffice.
Their recommendations then go to curriculum
Right.
director.
Right. Yes, that's what's the process. It's good for Ava.
Okay, shall review all this and submitted by, okay, company coordinates, that's good. It's not schools, but schools.
All right, so 108, we're going to see this back again anyway because we're doing the third first reading of policy 108, May 9th. So we will be, we're moving a bunch of information from policy 108 into the regulation, make that change regarding schools.
So you want this on the June legislative meeting when we do this?
Yes.
The third, second reading or whatever it is for the policy.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
right, so hopefully this will be on the agenda just in case for our next policy committee meeting in May, but with the plan that this goes for approval in June.
Okay, thank you.
And the reason it needs to do that is that if you take it off, then you have to put it back on for 2 readings.
Right.
The attachment A that's referenced, is that a standard attachment that we use? I mean, that, is it,
No, we don't have an attachment A. The note is it needs to be developed.
okay.
I think we want to take that out, and we have that.
To the first
it says
paragraph.
notification.
It's on G2 is right, so at first. Verifiable parental consent.
Yeah, so we should just remove the in the form of attachment A, because, you know, that will be fluid how we do that.
I have it.
Yeah, that would be great, yeah. It's a brave new world.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so again, we'll see break 108 back here with the hope that it goes move forward to approval in June. The next is the regulation 214, computing GPA, which corresponds with our modified policy 214. So this is setting an actual schedule of what the grades would look like. I mean, that's what the majority of it's doing. And this is for just the high school, is what this is.
Is there a reason we have that first sentence in there? It's, Upper Delton High School is not compute class learning, so, I mean, it's a sunny day.
I have actually
If we get a question about class rank, we can point people right to the document.
Okay. I just- Were we talking about policy, maybe it's in here, middle school and high school?
You know, we talked about it before about what,
We aligned the practice at the high school with the middle school, but I think this is only for the high school.
So then obviously, do we need a policy for a regulation for middle school? Thanks.
In fact, I would even suggest that
Just-
this 214, computing grade point average, somewhere down the high school. 214.1, computing grade point average, somewhere down the high school, and you can have one.
214.1 would be middle school.
No,
We're 214.2.
Point two,
hit
okay.
up point 1 or point 2.
this should be number 214.1.
You know what? Subtle, 214-1.
Thank you.
Not to go back to the policy, but if I'm comparing the policy to the regulation, some of the verbiage in that first paragraph to the policy is repeated in the regulation, but there's also some things that are missing per se. So the second line where it says courses taken in remedial summer programs will not be included in the calculation of the GPA, which is in the policy. Then we have kind of a more detailed paragraph, and so I'm not sure if it needs to be done in the policy and we just move that to the regulation. It just seems to be, it seems like they're both written at different times, where the language isn't consistent on both.
Let's make it, policy that's just valid in order, you can issue a decision about it, I mean, I don't know how it's really your discretion, whether it's policy or regulation. Whether it's a statement of philosophy that you want to do the board, or whether it's something that the board is perfectly happy to defer to the administration about.
You want to say the second sentence of the policy? We just heard that second.
I don't think they're inconsistent, are they?
They're not inconsistent, it's just one is a little bit more detailed. The regulation is a lot more detailed in regards to
Right.
what it's specifying.
Right.
And it goes beyond just remedial programs, so.
Right. Oh, I see. Well,
So I'm just wondering, I
one
guess-
says okay, one says courses taken in remedial summer program, the other says
Enrichment.
courses completed at for remediation.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, no, but that fourth paragraph versus courses completed for enrichment or acceleration, that those will also be included as well. So I guess my I would probably perhaps recommend just saying that that second sentence in the parent policy be strike and just move to regulation. My only other question would be for the administration in regards to where it says the method, because this was asked, I believe, at one of our legislative meetings, where it says the method used to compute grade point average will be described in the Upper Dublin High School Academic Program of Studies. We can always defer there, but I'm wondering whether or not it would be prudent for us to just bring it into the regulation, since it's more a copy and paste. And I believe this is where Mr. Schultz had referenced, the .99s and how that would be rounded up, et cetera, et cetera. The language that's in the program of studies.
I'm sorry, I thought the question was for administration.
It is.
Right.
How much detail do we need to spell out in the regulation, or is it sufficient just to say it's in the academic program of studies?
You just want to make sure that you don't need to be any clearer than that. As long as you're all comfortable not seeing, I mean, I don't know, there's no mechanism for board review of the course of studies. So if the board's comfortable, just saying, okay, whatever's in the course of studies in that handbook, we're willing to be, we're willing to have everybody live with that, that's fine. I don't see a reason why you wouldn't be okay with it, but that's the difference. The only difference is the board sees the language in one case and it doesn't see it in this setting.
How much language are we talking about? Do you have? Because my thought is, I hate when you refer, like one document refers you to another document, so you're just like chasing around looking for it. It's nice when all the answers are in one place. So if we're talking, and the other question is, how often does it get modified, what's in the program of studies? I'm not so worried about oversight as I am just making sure it's just easy to access.
Balancing that, making sure that everything says the same thing at the same time.
Yes, that's true.
Where is it? Is it in the student handbook? No, academic.
The program of studies, Robert's bringing it up here.
And who sets the program of studies? Is it the high school principal or?
Working with guidance, yes.
Okay. Does it get changed very often, do we know? Like specifically this paragraph, would we expect it to get changed anytime soon?
No, I would not anticipate it would be changed. Once this policy and reg is adopted, I think we'll be locked in.
Okay. Is it the sentence, the method used to complete grade point average will be described? Is that the one you're talking about?
Yes, that's the sentence.
I just think that's basically saying that the prisoner studies is going to say what's in this. I think that's all that says. Is this going to?
Well, we're actually only missing 2 lines from the program of studies. And so
Add that back.
and the 2 lines are 2 bullet points where it's, and this is the question that was asked, was scores of 0.49 or below will be rounded down to the nearest whole number. Scores of 0.50 or above will be rounded up to the nearest whole number. Everything else in the program of studies is exactly already repeated in the regulation. So it's almost,
Why not bring that in?
yeah, I would say bring that in just because that was one of the questions that was being asked.
So we'll add 2 of those.
So add those two bullet points. You can still leave, I think, the reference to the program of studies.
Yeah,
But
the
it at least brings in the full calculation so that parents are aware.
Where in the course of studies?
Page,
Proposed grading scale and grade point average is the subtitle. It's page 11. because the language of 5 data points is also added into the regulation as well. So it's already been copied over most of it.
Changing the number, changing it to 214 dash from high school, adding that with the,
He hasn't added it yet.
that's the language, taking that language out.
You'll have to modify some of the policy, some of the regs, because some specifically refers to the high school, so you're gonna have to put middle school language in some of the,
I think that was going to be 214.-2.
Yeah, I mean-
Dash 2, yeah, we're not ready for 214 dash 2
Right.
yet, yeah.
we'll have to ask Jill if there's anything specific when they do the calculations and how it works.
Right, they can start with this and then modify it to suit what their needs.
One question I have for the administration is, there's reference that students that complete a summer school course for original credit. Right in here, in the 1, 2, 3, 4th paragraph at the end. We have some courses I think that students can take for credit. Maybe it's Algebra 2 or some advanced courses that they can take over the summer and get regular high school credit for it. I just wonder the logic behind not a regular grade and not being counted in the GPA. And probably Mr. Schultz only knows the
Like our
answer.
remediation class.
No,
this
this is
is-
the last
No,
sentence.
the last
It's
sentence.
for original credit.
That's original
and
credit
I'm-
classes. I'm just
I would
wondering why.
imagine the nexus of that has to do with our teachers who, we're talking about seat time. Summer school courses generally not going to be as much time, but we certainly could.
Well, I think we should, I'd like to ask
Yeah,
because
we can certainly ask that
I
question.
know we have some students that they could be behind in the math program and they could take Algebra 2 to get caught up in that sequence, that are not always behind in the sequence. And if we're going to treat it as Algebra 2, it should be, when I went to summer school, college, you get credit and it's part of your GPA. It's because I graduated in 2 years, you know.
Not really giving, I would wonder if there would be kids who would just strategically only take certain classes in the summer because they're afraid of being
They pay for those classes.
I will ask the question.
That's fine, I mean, that's good.
That's a question for Bob. All right, so 214-1. We'll be going for approval here in May. Hopefully getting an answer to Dr. Levinowitz's question of the rationale behind why classes taken during the summer for the first time aren't a factor in the GPA, and whether that's what we want.
Please excuse this interruption. We just have one more announcement for this afternoon. Students, when you return on Wednesday, it will be a C day. A C day. Please keep that in mind. We are skipping the B day, which is tomorrow. Wednesday will be a C day. Thank you.
73 to 76. That's the temperature.
Okay, so,
Actually, not bad for this one, but it's just-
You're going to see my answer, C plus
all right, so,
Okay, I will get back to the board with, or the committee with that clarification.
all right, so next thing you know is a new item, and Mr. Sigafus is here, so she would like to discuss it as well. It's the new policy 354, 454.
Going back to the other one, so this rate is going to go for approval on
May 9th, yes. Okay. So So 354, 454, 554, and 831, maintaining adult-student boundaries, like a policy as well as a regulation. This is the first time we've discussed this at a policy meeting.
This is the AR?
There's both. It says administrative employees at the top. To I1 and I2 is the, I guess I3. That's the policy. It just says administrative employees up front, underneath section, and just the way that the formatting is.
Yeah, the administrative employee should be tabbed over to the end.
Mhm.
Oh, okay.
It's 4 different sections.
Right, it's in, because it's in, there's 4 policies in one. I know this was this policy has been discussed at different school solicitors meetings, and it was a suggestion, I think, by the PSBA of some sort to have a policy like this, so.
So administrative employees, professional, classified employees, what's the operations mean?
That's the section of the policy. Right.
800 would be the
831.
831. Just formatting.
The operational employees, you mean?
No, it's just in the manual, in the policy manual.
Okay.
Yeah, 800 is it's called operations.
It's where the student use regulations are, it's where contract services, where record.
Volunteers.
Okay. But it fits in, okay.
Mhm.
And the it's operations.
Just explaining why the numbers are what they are.
So on page I1, we've defined the term adults, which I think is appropriate. The term students is not necessarily defined. I'm wondering if it would be good to also define that. Since we're using kind of the nouns appropriately.
Chuck, we could define students. And just make it clear that we're talking about district students. And also, some of those policies that I'm actually dealing with when 3 or 4 different districts at the same time. There's been some other suggestions that I wanted to bring to your attention. One of which is making sure that there is 24/7 policy.
Yes.
Yes.
I want to add language about 24/7. Also, there are some questions that people wanted to know what precursor grooming was. I don't know if that's clear, you need a definition for that. I'm happy to provide one.
Yes.
And the one that I have to be honest with you most, is the thing that I think is missing from this that upon further review, I think probably ought to be in here is we're going to be more focused in here on educating other employees to be vigilant with inappropriate boundaries by their colleagues, by their employees. I'm learning the hard way. Many districts, not single John, I need one, certainly not for Dublin, but I'm learning the hard way that the bigger problem is you can service teachers so they're blue in the face of what they shouldn't do. They're going to do it anyway. It's better where you run into situations is where people say, I thought that person was kind of crossing the line, or I thought it was, and no one reported it.
I agree with you. I think this should be as tight as it possibly can, the policy and reg here.
I would add more burden on people to report them. Now, the outcome of that could be that trigger happy, but on the other hand, that's
Although, Mr. Bruce, we can encourage them. We can't require, I mean, administrative employees, we certainly can require them, but regular run-of-the-mill, especially employees that may or may not be within the same bargaining unit or in that classification, can we require them or
you can definitely encourage them, and I believe, yes, I think you can tell an employee if you see something going on that violates work policy, that you can say to them, it's part of your job to tell us.
Particularly when we're talking about maintaining appropriate boundaries with students, we're all mandated reporters. I see this as being an overflow to that. And it sets our expectation. And I must say, recently, we had staff members who did speak to us about it, and I'm very pleased that our staff maintains the safety of students the way they do. So
I would frame it as, encouraging them, requesting that they be vigilant. You don't want to make it sound like you're going to be punitive if you don't do it. You want to create an atmosphere where people are on the lookout and don't hesitate to come forward. That's what you're trying to do. So let me beat this up and bring it back. I'm sure you're comfortable with me doing that and getting it out to you, hands of the meeting, and people, whatever you're comfortable with.
Yes, any stuff?
Is,
Sarah, are you comfortable with just moving it forward to first reading?
Well, I'm thinking, where are most of the changes going to be made? I mean, I would like to do the first reading of the policy. I think for defining precursor grooming, defining students, those things are going to be done in the regulation. The adding anything about, this is a 24/7, I think that should probably be, I like having that actually in the policy. I think that's something easy to do. So by making those changes to the actual policy, I think we can move that for first reading, and then the beefing up the other things as Ken spoke about, I think go in the regulation, and we can have it, we'll have it back at May 23rd at our next policy meeting. So
I would appreciate that. I'd like to get us moving forward on this as soon as we conceivably can do that.
First read policy, AR coming back.
yeah, we'll be coming back, yeah, with some changes, so. I think all the other changes are really going to be within the regulation. The regulation is pretty long. I don't know if there's anything else discussed within it right now either, if we want to wait to the next meeting.
Well, if there's anything, let us know ahead, maybe you let us know ahead of time so that you can incorporate your suggestions into the next draft and have it
Yeah, so any suggestions, put it in a Google Doc and share it with just Ken's office and the administration, so we don't have any sunshine or any situations. The other regulation that's on the agenda is 204, attendance.
This was a request by Michelle. And this version doesn't have the changes. It's on Google Docs. The changes are on Google Docs.
So what we're looking is our current policy, or our current regulation. That's what's in the packet.
What you're looking at is a document that was at one point supposed to be your current regulation, but was never actually approved.
Okay.
Which I believe is what people are actually operating under. So this would actually formally enacted as a regulation with the changes that were requested by Michelle. They're all the changes that Michelle requested were to section of class cutting, which is on page J3, number 4, basically taking out D and putting in a series of progressive disciplines for class cutting.
Okay.
We want to look, like I said, it's in Word docs now.
Google Docs. Soon to be Word docs. Soon.
the rationale for that, that proposed change to number 4. And speaking with the administrators of the high school, currently the way it is listed, 4 cuts from a class really expedited a consequence of dropping the course very, very quickly. And we didn't want to continue to maintain that threshold because it was so low. Students were being exited from classes. Sometimes it's classes that they need for graduation. So we wanted to provide a more restorative type of hierarchy so that we can work with the family when cuts start to, manifest themselves with the student and address it in a proactive way rather than just removing them from the course. So this is the cumulative recommendation of Bob Schultz, Chris Michener, Tim Callahan, and Jerry Thompson.
Michelle, I don't know if you had a chance to look at what I did. Are you okay with that? You okay with what to do with your notes?
I'm confused how that 1, 2, and 3, the Roman numerals, 1, 2, and 3 under A. That looks contradictory because it says 1 credit course is 4 cuts, but then we're breaking it down differently. So what we're doing, we have to take out those Roman numerals. Roman numerals 1, 2, and 3 under A.
Under 4A.
Strike 1, 2, and 3 under 4A. Okay.
All right, well, I guess you can do it from your notes. That's fine. All right, so you just want that.
Thank you.
I just have to edit.
Alright. So you're good with this? Alright.
You just make a semantic change on the top of page J2. When deemed necessary, the parent guardian is contacted by phone and/or letter to discuss further absences, maybe perhaps because in the day of email, we just will be contacted by verbal or written communication to further discuss the details. Just because I'm sure email. Yeah, just because email may be used.
I think so. I don't see any other changes. If none, we'll move that for approval on May 9th.
Places where
Right.
the pupil is using this.
Student.
Okay.
I ask another question in regards to definitions? Because I'm trying to make sure I understand it too. What would be the definition of truancy, and should that be added to the definition and the definitions on the first page? Because it kind of goes from absent, tardy to cut, and then it talks about illegality as we begin number 2. Under truancy. Whereas I don't see necessarily a definition for that.
It'll be defined as accumulation of 3 or more illegal absences, but that's not a bad idea. But yeah, I agree. Thank you. It'll be a definition of the definition. 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So GQ student had definition of truant. Move that 10-minute language to 3.
Okay, so that'll go forward to approval on May 9th. I didn't put enough on the agenda today. I think the next thing on the agenda is, I think there were, Mr. Schroeder had made some other suggestions via email on policies that went towards second reading. Specifically, it's policy and regulation 709. I think this was building security. I just want to, I guess, discuss what Mark had suggested and decide. I mean, we did pass it, so that way we can go back towards 709 if we want to make any changes and start the.
But it might be more, I'm not trying to shorten this meeting, but it may be more efficient if you give us first crack at taking Mark's suggestions, and if administration agrees, you may just come forward with a revised regulation, or at least an explanation as to why not. I apologize, I did not go through his recommendations one by one and decide they were.
All right, I think for 709 specifically, regulation, I think there were, it's like a couple dozen edits. But yeah, okay. Right, if you want to do that.
Sure.
I think do you have that email? I think you do, right?
I believe I do, if I don't, I will ask.
There you go.
I'm pretty sure you
I think so. Okay. All right, and the other suggestions that Mark had made in his email, we discussed today. We're on policy on the other policies that were listed in the agenda: 108, 214, 253, and 800. So we did cover his concerns as we promised we would at the last legislative session. So I guess the next thing that just for discussion is the 600s. I think that's where we're going to be going from here to start looking at a section. I think we've gotten through the 000s now. I know about 2 years ago a review was done of the 200s. However, I'm not sure if all of those policies were reviewed were then enacted or adopted. So I want to probably probably sit down with Michelle and just talk to her a little bit and make sure we got through things at some point. And if not, we can get forward with all those, because I think there was some discussion of some things we were waiting for feedback and we hadn't heard things. And we might have just lost a couple of those along the way. So I guess the next section of the policy book that we want to look forward to is going to be the 600s. I think that some of that review is going to be with Brenda as well, taking a look and making sure that our policies are consistent with practice.
So do you want to start with 601 and just work through the list?
We're actually ready to give Brenda our suggested changes to the 600. So I'll get that to her within the next week or so.
Great.
There is one policy and regulation that's going to require perhaps some fast tracking on Maureen's guidance.
Yes.
Which is a hot topic these days among business people.
What number is that?
It'll be a new policy.
It'll be a new policy.
policy.
Okay.
Uniform grain guidance. It's recently enacted regulations that are
We could move that to the top of the 600 list if you so advise.
Dr. Wheeler, I think I sent that to you from Policy News Network. PSBA sent it to us recently, so I haven't sent it.
And it was also in your solicitor office update. Made it wait long enough for me to get the last section of that.
PASBO had a webinar on it as well last week for the business administrators, so this is an important change.
All right. Well, with that, we made it through the agenda. It's not even 3 o'clock, so. We're trying. We've wasted 40 minutes here. So, but anyway, since there is no community members, this would be the time for community input. So, does anybody else have any other announcements, communications at this point? Seeing none. Okay, we will.
Can I just ask 2 questions? But both of them relate to board docs, and so I know that PSBA was in the process of trying to upload our policies. Is there any updates in regards to that?
We've not received an update. Adoption of board docs for this workflow is independent of the piece that we already have paid PSBA to do, which is to take our documents and put them into that portal, and we're still waiting. Brooke might have some news. I know she's reached out to them. I've been coordinating with the board docs vendor to start that process. But for our workflow here at the end of the school year, we're looking at a July, let's bring the board in, train everybody, and get that all going.
That's great.
You did actually segue my second question. So I guess as a policy committee, we should start thinking about who needs to be trained for board docs to make sure that the workflow does get improved. And so,
Nice. Until we're up and running on board docs, I think the best way, if we do have edits or suggestions or things like that, we really keeping it on the Google format at this point is the easiest way to track that. So if we have any other until we get to board docs, if we can try to keep using the Google shared documents, I think it's probably the easiest way for us to all be able to track the changes until that point. Okay. Good now? All right. All right, so we're adjourned then. We'll be back May 23rd at 1:30, somewhere here in the high school probably. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
We're done. And this microphone is amazing. Yeah, it's just like, this is the